Hello and welcome to another episode of the Frontend Coffee Break, a podcast where we take a break from our everyday lives, grab a cup of Joe, tea, or whatever you fancy, and discuss different front-end related topics. And today, as always, I have Ricard with me. Hello, Ricard, welcome.
Hello, Chucho. Thank you.
And well, my name is Chucho. We're both senior front-end developers at Cognizant NetCentric. And today's topic is a topic that is a bit close to my heart, I would say. It's something that I've been working with, or something that is a topic that is related to work that I've done throughout the years, which is progressive enhancement. And we're here to discuss a little bit about what is progressive enhancement, what are the advantages, disadvantages, is it feasible, why should you do it, or why should you not do it, or whatever. Just discuss a little bit about our experience working with it, and maybe for those that haven't worked with it to get to know it and try it out, maybe.
Just maybe. Okay. So, do you want to go, or should I try to define what progressive enhancement means?
Let's go with the what we think progressive enhancement is to ourselves, and then we can read the official or one of the definitions of what progressive enhancement is and see
Okay.
how
Okay.
close we are to it.
For me, okay. Well, I mean, when you define something, you cannot use the word, so I cannot say when you progressively enhance
Why not?
application UI. I would say when you deliver something that works for most people, but then if the user has like a browser or a device that can do more, then you deliver to them more stuff.
I would the way that I would explain what progressive enhancement is basically you build something that works and you go from that base building over it and over it and over it things that work better and better and better. In the Mexican culture we had the Aztecs and the and other native Mexicans, let's call them, people from America, that when they were building the pyramids, you could see that the pyramids and other constructions are actually layers over layers over layers of constructions. I mean, it's not exactly the same thing with progressive enhancement, but in the end, the idea is similar to this: that you build something that works, and then you build something on top of it that works as well, and you go on and on enhancing and making adding functionality. But if for whatever reason there's a moment that some of these functionality is not available, you still have the lower layer to that works to fall back on, let's say.
Okay, so basically, like you deliver a complete solution or a complete working product or implementation, whatever it is, functionality to all users or to
Yeah,
the most, of course, the most users.
that would be the basic idea. Let's look at a little bit about the well, one definition that wiki definition, Google definition. So one way to define it more officially would be that progressive enhancement provides a baseline of essential content and functionality to as many users as possible, just like you said, while delivering the best possible experience only to users of the most modern browsers that can run all the required code. And actually, this is a term that was coined by Stephen Champion and Nick Fink at the SXSW Interactive Conference on March 11th, 2003. And in a presentation that was called Inclusive Web Design for the Future. And the way that they defined this was the goal of web design is not merely to dazzle, but to deliver information to the widest audience possible. Compromise is possible and desirable, but such compromise should not come at the expense of the user, but rather in terms of the native capabilities of the user's choice of device. Leave no one behind. So the idea is that you compromise regarding on the functionality, but based on what you choose to use what device you choose to use when navigating the web. So, for example, if you're navigating with the best browser with the latest computer, you have maybe the biggest experience. But if you choose, I don't know, a Nintendo Game Boy or some device that has a browser inside it, you still get a good experience using it.
I like the last part. It looks like very like in the military, leave no man behind. I like it. But I wonder, like, how do you define like the most users? Is it something like do you check like analytics? Do you check your stats and say, okay, most my user base is using, I don't know, and Internet Explorer 11. Should I go for that, or is it? I mean, how do you define the?
Well, in this case, I mean, it's always a matter of how you say, as you say it, a matter of what your target audience is, and definitely analytics should be something that you take into account when looking at the devices that your clients are using. I've been in projects in which we precisely say, okay, do we want to see? We're right now investing a lot of energy supporting Internet Explorer 11 back when. And we said, is it really worth it? And let's look at the user base on not the general user base, but the user base of our website and see how many people are actually using Internet Explorer 11. And based on that, you can choose, well, I'm going to give it support to it or not. But the idea behind progressive enhancement is that you try to deliver the best experience possible for every single person. If they're using Internet Explorer, they're still going to get a good experience. They're still going to be able to use the website. They're not going to be, maybe they're going to be missing out on animations or some other features, but they're still going to be able to use the website. And that's the idea. The same thing is if they're using a very old phone, they're still going to be getting the experience of being able to use the website.
Sounds as a developer very expensive to do, right? Because if you have to support a wider range of devices and browsers, it takes so much extra effort to do that,
But
no?
that's the beauty in a way about the progressive enhancement. You
Okay.
really don't have to support the a wide variety of browsers or this kind of thing. No. Because the way that you build the progressive enhancement, you, for example, build let's you begin with the HTML. You build a good, well semantic structured HTML, and I mean, if a browser does not support HTML, then what are you doing here
Yeah, just
navigating with that
go
browser?
home.
Exactly.
Use paper.
And then you start building with the css over that, and browsers that support the css will be able to use that as well. And then you build with javascript on top of that, and browsers that have activated javascript or use javascript will be able to use that. But if you have deactivated javascript, you're still going to get the css experience. If you don't have
Okay,
css,
okay. How many browsers do not support CSS, or how many browsers do not support JavaScript? Is it really realistic in 2023 to be talking about progressive enhancement?
I would say yes. For example, I don't know about you, but when I am on the subway or I'm reading the news, I deactivate, actually in my phone, I deactivate JavaScript, because reading the news there and opening a news page, an article to start reading it, if you have JavaScript activated first, it starts loading a ton of additional JavaScript libraries that, well, they don't deliver any real value to me. Maybe they will add publicity or try to add fancy things, but they really don't. I don't need them. So I just want to read the article. So I have JavaScript turned on, and most of the time the articles load faster, and I'm able to read them.
Yeah, yeah, of
Then,
course. It's just text. I mean, but the examples you're giving is a very like easy case to solve, no? Because it's just you just deliver semantic HTML, your article, heading, footer, navigation, everything works just fine because they are linked to HTML. You don't need JavaScript. When you talk about like a complex application with lots of interactions, it feels like adding, no JavaScript solutions to to support these users when it's very JavaScript heavy sounds complex and difficult.
well, I think I don't know about you, but right now, I mean, the web has evolved a lot since 2003 when this concept was presented. I mean, precisely, we have super. I don't think back then, 2003, was jQuery a thing. I don't know when was jQuery.
I don't remember. No.
I remember working on it 2006, 2007, so more or less around the that area. I'm saying jQuery because I think that jQuery was the library that changed the way that we did the front end. So that's why I'm referring to that one. But for sure, we've come a long way. And right now, thinking about maybe progressive enhancement, it's not something that is for every single project. We have such amazing things that we can do in the front end with the new frameworks that we have. That progressive enhancement might not be something or that we should that is completely feasible. But I mean, using the progressive enhancement principles, we will be able to build good websites regardless.
Okay, you're saying good websites, but what does it mean? I mean, what is the advantage of using progressive enhancement? Or what does it make it good? Or what are you taking out of? I mean, tell
For
me
example,
more.
for example, one of the biggest advantages, I think, it's that it because of the way that you need to build the website, the way that you need to build your components or your applications, you need to apply certain philosophy that actually improves accessibility. Because if you're trying to build a website that it's well structured in HTML wise, that means that it's going to be more accessible, you know. And if and it's for people that are not, for example, that don't have JavaScript or CSS, that people that use screen readers that might not have this deactivated, that it would be if you build on that philosophy, it'll be better for them. You will be able to
I agree
intrinsically.
totally. So I think, sure, maybe the listeners are already seen developers that not that doesn't come news to them. But imagine like two HTMLs, like sure, a newspaper article where you use like your heading is just a div or a span, the content is just a div, and the footer is just a div. When you don't load any JavaScript or CSS, it would all look the same, right? But if you use semantic markup, if you use H1, H2, paragraphs, sections, articles, footer tags, all those will render with default browser styles, and it will already look decent enough to read if you don't have any JavaScript or CSS. So yeah.
And just going back a little bit on regarding on the very simple example of reading an article, you would be surprised to see how many websites do not work if you have articles do not work if you don't have JavaScript on, because they say read more just to expand it,
Right.
but it's covering already. And you shouldn't be, the philosophy of when you build this, you should not build it in such a way that you need JavaScript to actually read it.
Well,
It
and they
should be.
have this sort of like, subscriptions. If you're not subscribed, they first show you something and then an overlay says, hey, you have to pay $10 a month to see it, things like that. Yeah, yeah. But I think definitely using semantic markup, that would help because, browsers have like Firefox, they have these like is it view mode or something, reader mode, where you click and then it strips everything out and just leaves you with the actual text, and it's useful. So, okay, so accessibility, it's fantastic. What else is good for the web when you look at enhancement, progressive?
Well, technically, you're also future proofing in a sense that you're preparing for, because you're building something on what you have right now. If something new comes up, you can then enhance your application on whatever is new coming on, and the people that don't have that new things will still be able to use the website the way that they're currently
Right,
using
because
it.
if you already build something on version, whatever it is, usually browsers don't break backwards compatibility, so you will still work regardless if in 10 years we work with holographic browsers.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's always easier to add on than to remove. And another option is another improvement is that it usually is more performant. The websites that you work with performance enhancement in mind are usually more performant. But then again, now that we're talking about the future proofing and this kind of things, there's another concept that goes hand in hand. The You have on one side the progressive enhancement, on the other side you have graceful degradation. I don't know if you've worked with this philosophy or you've
Sounds
heard.
very apocalyptic. Degradation. What is happening here? Is it a video game?
No, graceful degradations is really about you built the website thinking about using the latest features, thinking about, for example, I don't know, I'm going to use Chrome, the latest version that supports all the latest CSS, JavaScript, and then I create things that might adapt to for people that don't have these features, so that you start doing degrading the website. You start building things that degrade the website so that users that don't have these features can use it
Okay,
for
so it's
whatever reason.
complete opposite from progressive. I mean, from progressive enhancement, you start from very low end, let's say, devices or browsers. But in this case, you start from the latest and greatest, and then patch down if you need to. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to work in this depending on the type of project that you're working in. For example, you might receive a project that is already built, and it only works on the latest and greatest, and you need it, or you'd like to make it more accessible to more people. You would like to make it, yeah, that people that don't have the latest, or maybe people that had a browser, or that, for example, you build it only for desktop and you want it to work on mobile devices as well. Well, you basically do follow a graceful degradation philosophy, in which you start building ways that if you don't have the latest features, it's still going to be working. I mean, this is a very valid use case. Also, it might be very expensive to build progressive enhancement website. You might as well just build it the best and then try to make it.
Yeah, I think that's usually the approach most of us take. Like we always start with the latest ES syntax, latest CSS, like CSS grade, subgrade, all those things, cool stuff. And then you add, like back when we had IE in play, now luckily no more, but I remember like having to patch things. For instance, we would build a layout using grid, but then like we would gracefully degrade to maybe floats or maybe widths on a simple way, not maybe following exact the columns of grid, but a simpler layout with four Internet Explorer. So yeah, just going down. Okay, it doesn't fully break, but it doesn't look as good as latest browser.
And do you have any other experience working on either graceful degradation or progressive enhancement personally?
Um, yes. I mean, but usually again, graceful degradation, like patching stuff, or also like using the latest like JavaScript APIs for progressive enhancement. Like I remember, we had some sort of sticky tables or something, sticky headers. And I know that in IE you wouldn't have the position sticky CSS solution, right? So I remember having a bunch of JavaScript for that particular browser. But then if we detected that we were then on a modern browser, we would just use the CSS position sticky, right? Which is just one line and everything is solved for you. I think, yeah, that will be another example.
Well, I in the past, I think that the time that I've used more the progressive enhancement philosophy has been with forms. You know,
Yeah.
that the first is that you build something that works with forms, validates forms, and back then, I'm talking back then when we had HTML4, you had to validate the forms. You didn't have really ways to validate the form on the front end, or at least not as powerful as the ones that we have right now. So that when the what you would do is you would just have your basic form and you would submit it, and then it would be sent to the backend that needed to validate it and maybe reload the page again. And then once you had that working, then you added the JavaScript on top of that. And you made it so that you did the validations before sending it to the backend. And maybe the backend would never have to validate something like, for example, a date, or maybe that you're sending on only numbers and this kind of things. So this, for example, would be a progressive enhancement approach in
Yeah, I
which.
mean, and you would laugh, but I'm sure that kids nowadays, and I say kids, that people that start coding in 2023, they don't really know that you can actually submit a form using just method post, and if the backend is prepared for to receiving an HTTP post request, it will just work. And now everybody is they start with API first nowadays, right? And they just assume that everybody has JavaScript and everybody can do Ajax calls and REST APIs. And back in the day, we used to not have that. So yeah.
Well, I find it funny the term API first. Could you just elaborate on this one a
No. I
bit?
mean, yeah. Usually, the new projects are all API first. Like, I mean, and that's also good news for the front end. Like, you have your front end very decoupled from the back end, and then everything's API. Your content comes from an API. Your validation comes from an API. Forms, everything goes to API, and that there's no like backend rendering almost, right? So when you talk about using single page applications with Vue or Svelte or whatever, yeah, working on an API first architecture, it's what nowadays one approach. And I wanted to mention Svelte. I know you've been playing with Svelte, and I was reading how Svelte works with price enhancement, and I found it very interesting. So there's a link there on the documentation, and they say that, okay, for regular links to other pages, like you have a link on a component that goes to another page, they can use an A tag, which is perfectly semantic, and it works fantastically. It will do a page reload, and the server will load the next page. But you can progressively enhance with Svelte or whatever framework, and then that link could be converted to a single page application routing, client side and routing, basically. So you wouldn't see the page load because you had more JavaScript, or the browser was capable of doing stuff, and then you do that, right? The same with forms, as you said before. Forms, I think it's something that out of the box works fantastically. You have required patterns, many validations like inline with your attributes. But if you have JavaScript, it opens a new world of validation. You have to use a validation API, and you can intersect with those events, and really it's powerful. In our project, we use that. We use all the browser validation, but on top we add our JavaScript, and then it looks like in line with the business coloring and stuff.
And this is something that I was surprised because with the new frameworks, they don't really pay attention to this kind of details about the progressive enhancement details or things to validate things. Oh no, to support things that are not uh, JavaScript oriented. If you want to have a button, it won't be a regular button, but it would have JavaScript to do something. The same thing if it's a link, it might not even be a simple link. It would have JavaScript to do something.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that we live in HTML and CSS have advanced so much since even back 2003. They have advanced so much, and you can do so many things that you actually don't need JavaScript, sorry, for it. For example, just one of the typical cases, tabs. I mean, how would you build a tab, a progressive enhancement tab component? And it's fairly simple. You begin with HTML, just HTML, and you have a list of links that, for example, move that when you click on it, they move to a section of the page that have the section that you want to show in
Okay,
the
so an
tab.
anchor, nah, an
An
anchor link.
anchor,
Okay, yeah.
precisely. You have an anchor link, and that's it. And it actually works the same. It gives you the same feature of a tab where you click on an element and you go directly or start reading what you're interested in. Then you can, if you add a little bit of CSS, you can actually just style it as tabs. And right now with the things available for CSS, you can actually select the tab and it will show the content of that tab. You don't even need JavaScript, and then you can add JavaScript on top of that to make it, for example, to make it even more accessible. They're talking about accessibility per se, like so you're on a tab and activating and deactivating the different area attributes and so on and so forth. So you can progressively enhance this very simple component that is quite used, and it's following best practices there when you
Yeah,
observe
I
them.
love it that you start from a perfectly semantic HTML, and that works already out of the box. And I really love HTML in that sense because it's so powerful. It's, yeah, no CSS, no JavaScript, it will work. The content is there, rendered. It's for like, search engine optimization. It will work just fine. Readers work just fine. So yeah, I love it.
Because in the end, especially as you just said it, at one point you might be asked, hey, we need to make this site accessible for screen readers. And if you start with this kind of philosophy, it's going to be simpler to build an accessible website than to if you start with a much more complex solution and then try to adapt it. It's a little bit like mobile first approach, in which you first build for the mobile, and it's easier to just add up design to make it look better and bigger screens than to start on a desktop first approach and then start adding styles to make it look better when it's smaller. In my experience, you end up having much less CSS if you go for a mobile first approach than a desktop first approach.
Same. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Even
do you think, like, I mean, I'm sure everybody has examples of desktop first solutions where, yeah, it's a dashboard and the users will not look at it in mobile. But let's say that you do have a mobile, sorry, a desktop application, right? And you have to maintain it, you have to go for it. Then if you gotta go mobile, will you choose like a graceful degradation approach where on the mobile view you would not have all the features of the desktop view, or how would you approach it as a tech lead?
I'm always even if for example 80% of my the clients are desktop users and only 10% are mobile, I would always go for a mobile first
Right.
approach, no, regardless, because what I said, it's just gives you it's easier in the end to do it. Like you have much less code when you do it this way. I'm of the philosophy that a mobile site doesn't necessarily have to have every single functionality that you have in the desktop one. I mean, you definitely have to have all the what that's important, but you don't need to have every single thing that you have in the desktop. So I would be hiding stuff, or the other way around. I would be, yeah, things will be by default. A lot of the things might be hidden, and then eventually when you make your application bigger or use a bigger, wider screen, things would start appearing there. I don't know.
No, I think you see it more and more with Google Web Apps and other big companies where on the mobile side they tell you please go to the desktop. I mean, sure they're responsive and they have basic buttons and stuff, but when it comes to like granular editing of, I don't know, slides or Excel spreadsheets, usually they just tell you to go to the desktop side, and it's maybe it's fine.
Well, for example, this sheet, Google Sheets. Do you need it in the mobile? Are you going to use that? Are you going to create a or be editing formulas through your phone? Maybe not.
I mean, for just reading, and doing simple editing, like maybe text, and you should, sure, small formula, but not for big stuff. So yeah, I think it's a valid approach.
Now, I would like to just showcase, for example, a very simple example of the difference between a mobile first approach and a mobile first approach, a progressive enhancement approach and a graceful degradation one, which would be a simple print button. You know, if you want to do a progressive enhancement print button, people might think by default, and I've seen examples of people saying, "Oh, you use the no script tag, and in the no script tag, you add a message that says if you want to activate the print, you need to activate JavaScript." That is not progressive enhancement, because people are going to see that by default, and that might not have JavaScript, and they would say, "What? Java what?" Maybe they don't know it. Maybe they are even, and this is very interesting. Maybe they're working on a computer that doesn't have JavaScript by default because it needs to be more secure. You know, so there might be many possibilities for why this wouldn't work. A progressive enhancement approach would be to show a message by default that says, "Here's your information. Please print it if you want to keep a copy from it." That's it. Just like it says a message like if you want to print it, print it. How they're
Right. So
gonna
the,
print it?
the, the user would, just maybe control P or file print, right, from the
Yeah.
browser. Okay.
And then you create a JavaScript that if you detect that the browser actually has the capabilities of doing it, you build the print button and you remove the message, and the button will be there only if you have the capabilities to do it, just like with in the other case. But in the case that there's no capabilities, there's no confusion of saying, "Hey, you should turn on JavaScript. This is not going to work if you don't have JavaScript." No, no, no. It's just simply, "Thank you very much, and if you want to print this, don't forget to print it if you want to keep a copy." That's
That's
it.
fantastic. Yeah, it's way more intuitive, better UI, better UX. Yeah, I'm on board. Good one.
And right now that you have, as I saying, there's so many ways that we can, so many tools that you can use to facilitate the progressive enhancement builds. Like for example, I didn't know about this because I'm not using it that much. But for example, for CSS, there is actually a supports primitive. Or, yeah, I don't know if you call it
Yeah, yeah,
primitive.
I've used it a lot until I had to drop. Oh, I had to. I was allowed to drop Internet Explorer, so no more. But it's fantastic. You just, let's say, I don't know. Grids is a perfect example. No, so you have your class, and then you write some properties, and then you add supports grid, and then inside that condition, you just add more stuff, and then if the browser supports the grid property, you would execute. It's like when you have like back in the days, but okay, not so long ago, uh, gradients were not supported in browsers. Like you would have browsers that don't support linear gradients or radial gradients. So you would do background red, and then on the next line you would do background and then linear gradient, right? So the browser would first read the color red, it would print it, and then if it was supported, they would read the gradient and do it. It's in the same principle, and it works fantastically. If you have to support like IE and other stuff, just use it. Supports, I love it.
Yeah, and this is something that might not be, unless you've been working a little bit, might not know about it. And then, if you're working on JavaScript and you know that you want to support JavaScript, you can also use libraries like Modernizer or other approaches in which it tries to determine, for example, does this browser support this? Then I'll use it. If it doesn't, then I'll simply not use it. Well, there's this, just as an example. For example, there's this website, the one from the BBC News. I think they had this philosophy that's called I think cutting the mustard, and the idea is that they would have some JavaScript checks. That if the checks went through, they would just show you a full experience, full JavaScript experience site.
Website, yeah.
But if for whatever reason the browser or the device or whatever thing you were using to watch the this then BBC News didn't cut the mustard, then they would simply just show you. They would take JavaScript off and they would show you the HTML CSS
That's
version.
awesome. I mean, no JavaScript means no tracking, means no ads. That's a good one for them. Yeah, I know you can use like the Navigator API to know if the user has certain bandwidth or connection. So you could check for that. You could check for other browser settings, and if all goes through, just add more JavaScript. Why not?
Well, to close this episode today, my recommendation would be I've been I read around a little bit about progressive enhancement and what it is and so on and so forth, and a lot of the articles that I found are very vague. They just say, "Oh, it's fantastic. You should try it out." Um, my recommendation is, if you're interested, I would recommend to read a little bit about what it is, try to find out different techniques. We've talked about a few of them here. I mean, it's not necessarily something that you must do. I do recommend it to follow, but I would recommend definitely to follow a progressive enhancement approach in which you start building with a strong HTML base, then you add the CSS that works on that, and then on top of that, when you build the JavaScript, try to build it that it enhances, not that the things are working just through JavaScript, but that JavaScript enhances the component.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I think we are going back to the origin when we started doing this, and then we went full framework, right, for a couple of years, where all the HTML is rendered in the JavaScript, which is a mistake, and then we are now back to rendering HTML and hydrating and enhancing with JavaScript. So yeah, all good, man.
Well, I I hope that you enjoyed the episode. I mean, it's a very fascinating topic, and hopefully, we can be talking in the future about other things that we mentioned here, a mobile first approach, and other ways to build better user experiences and such. Well, that's it, I guess. Thank you very much, Ricardo.
Thank you. See you in the next Frontend Coffee Break.
See you then. Bye.